English translation, 261st contact, Tuesday, 24th of February 1998, 09:03 hours.
Your day starts early today, but I have to come at this time because I have to return in 2 hours to Era.
Not so bad, because even as a night person I can get up a little earlier. Besides, I have already slept 5 hours because I went to bed a little earlier than usual.
Good. Then we will immediately dedicate ourselves to the group manual, if you want to consult your documents.
I already did. So we can start. But afterwards, I would have 1 or 2 more questions for you if time permits.
Of course.
Well, let us go, my friend.
With that, we should have done what was necessary.
An hour's work, but leafing through, searching, and taking notes takes time. But can I ask my questions now?
Certainly.
The thing is actually quite banal with regard to the first question. It refers to the hygiene of humans, about which there are always ambiguities. With flowing water, of course, so-called dead objects or materials, such as crystals, precious stones, minerals and metals, etc., can be cleaned or freed from negative and positive swinging waves if they are left in flowing water long enough, which takes 2 to 3 days at a weight of 1 to 3 grams, depending on the material. This fact has taken hold and should be clear. What has not yet been understood, however, is the cleansing of the body with water, with or without detergents such as shampoos, alkalis, salts and soaps, etc.
As far as I know, however, you have already created enlightenment in this respect in 1982.
I know. It was when the Americans were there with Lee Elders to shoot the contact film. The matter was raised and answered in a kitchen discussion. I explained at that time that showering, bathing or washing the body more often was harmful if detergents such as salts, shampoos, soaps, lyes or gels, etc. were used, because such substances on the one hand leach out the skin and the pores, and also impair the body swinging waves, whereby the immune system is weakened. Consequently, a whole body wash with such cleansers should only be carried out once a week. However, if daily washes, showers, or baths are carried out with cleansers that are aggressive for the skin, pores, and swinging waves, then this weakens health and swinging waves. If, however, only gentle and thus no aggressive cleaning agents are used, then also the danger of the immunodeficiency and the impairment of the individual and other body oscillations sinks accordingly, whereby this can be, however, also only up to a certain degree the case. If, however, only pure, clean water is used for hygiene care. As for short washing, showering, or bathing, then neither the immune system nor the skin nor the pores or the swinging waves are affected, because by pure water, no damage develops in this relationship. So the individual bodily swinging waves are not disturbed or even destroyed, because the water, which changes again and again into its original state without chemical additives, only removes the dirt from the body, but not the swinging waves, which furthermore regenerate themselves again and again, if they are not affected or destroyed by alkalis, etc. With pure water, only swinging waves from so-called dead materials can be removed and eliminated for a long time, because these materials cannot regenerate the swinging waves stored in them, because they penetrate into them from the outside, which does not refer to the natural swinging waves of the materials, but only to those which penetrate into them from the outside, like human swinging waves stored into them. So as a human being, you can bathe, shower, or wash yourself 8 or 9 times a day, or even more often with pure, clean water, without damaging the immune system or the swinging waves. So there is no excuse for dirty smears and other dirty people not to wash themselves thoroughly every day and as often as necessary. And if the hands and arms or certain parts of the body note, for example, intimate area, and not the whole body, are washed with mild detergents, then this does not carry much significance. Is that correct?
You have explained the facts correctly.
Well, then here is the second question that refers to guillotining. In general, it has been said since time immemorial, and explained by so-called experts, that beheading as a method of execution is the fastest and most humane method. As if the execution of a human being could be humane at all. Well, in earlier times it was often observed that heads that were cut off were not simply restless, but that they often still moved their eyes and lips, etc. From this it was concluded that the head or brain was still alive, although there were fierce disputes among experts about this. Now I have found the following in the PM Magazine number 15 on pages 46 and 47 under the title The Historical Event, which I reproduce in freestyle.
Guillotine. It is a child of the French Revolution. A few months after the storming of the Bastille, on the 10th of October 1789, Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotin demanded before the National Assembly the equality of all convicts before death. No one is to be tortured anymore, and everyone, regardless of his status, is to receive the same punishment for the same crime. The anatomy professor at Paris University had in mind a faster, more painless method of killing. Dr. Guillotin explained that the criminal should only be beheaded by means of a simple mechanical device. On the 1st of December 1789, during his second speech to Parliament, he described the details of his killing device, but his speech was not recorded for posterity. What has been handed down are only his words about the effect of the afterlife transport machine. The mechanism works like lightning. The head rolls, the blood gushes, the human is no longer. Almost 2 years passed before Guillotin was really able to assert himself, for it was not until the 3rd of June 1791 that the National Assembly decided that the head of everyone sentenced to death should be cut off. And with a decree of the 20th of March 1792, it was decreed that from then on, every beheading should be expedient, equal for all, and, as far as possible, humane and carried out with a machine. The question remained whether beheading with a guillotine really guaranteed that fast and humane death as the inventor of the killing machine had hoped. It had been observed before that the faces of the beheaded moved for some time. In 1795, for example, the German anatomist Samuel Thomas Simmering heard from colleagues that the lips of a cut-off human head were moving, or that the cut-off heads were grinding with their teeth. From this, the professor concluded that in severed heads the consciousness and thus also the sensation of pain were preserved for a considerable time. Imagine that. As the last clear thought before death, a decapitated human being has the horrible realization that he or she has been decapitated and is now lying there in two parts. An idea or an event that an upright human probably does not wish for his or her worst enemy and the worst criminal. There were pros and cons, and so there was a bitter dispute between opponents and supporters regarding these theses. It should be clear that both sides did not shrink back from experiments on beheaded people. So far this, and since then many things have changed on our earth. In the meantime, the medical scientists have settled their dispute and made a final decision, which, as you can imagine, has turned out in favor of the beheading machine, namely, by the fact that the medical scientists explain that it takes about 3 minutes from the moment of decapitation and thus from the moment of the interruption of the blood supply to the brain until the cerebral cells die, and 8 minutes until the individual death occurs. Already within the first 10 seconds after beheading, the executed person should lose consciousness in his or her severed head. In addition, there is the shock. It is said, certain endogenous substances, the so-called encephalins, are supposed to occupy key places on the nerve endings in a flash, whereby the victim is no longer able to perceive pain. Through this painlessness, the beheading, especially through the speed and precision of the guillotine, should be humane, which is an unbelievable mockery and a contradiction in itself, because in fact and truth there is in no form a humane execution, no matter from whatever point of view, and whether a death penalty is imposed by hanging, strangling, stoning, shooting, beheading with an axe, sword or guillotine, or at older times by burning, wheeling, boiling in hot oil, drowning or quartering, etc. Even the allegedly humane killing methods must never hide the fact that the execution of people in the name of the law is nothing other than pure murder, and in any case can only be relatively humane. But now the question about the killing method of decapitation. To what extent is it true that a decapitated human being does not consciously notice the cutting off of their head, as the doctors claim? You and Quetzal once told me something else.
With regard to the painlessness that is supposed to occur in the head and body during beheading, it has to be said that this is indeed the case, and that the medical clarifications are correct. However, this is only true if the head is completely separated from the trunk within a fraction of a second. What is against all truth, however, is the fact that consciousness disappears within a few seconds with the separation of the head from the trunk. Because in fact it continues to exist for several minutes and is therefore active, which under certain circumstances can last up to 20 and more minutes. This, however, cannot be established with the equipment and devices of the most modern kind that have been conventional on Earth until now, because the actual brain activity is switched off within seconds, which does not apply to the consciousness itself, because this still functions for quite a while without the actual and ascertainable brain activity, and consequently the heads fully realize everything by beheading the executed for long and terrible minutes before the consciousness actually goes out. But if the earthly physicians claim otherwise, and thus the opposite, then this does not only correspond to arrogance and ignorance of the facts.
That is what you have said before, in other words, like Quetzal. But unfortunately, we did not record the statements in writing, like so many others, because we never recorded the private conversations. That is why I asked you again, officially, so to speak.
That is what I thought. By the way, in some original contact report pages you made some mistakes, which you should correct. With Michael Heseman you wrote, for example, he is a pure Earth-created one, but he is not a pure Earth-created one would be correct. You have also written the name Randy Winters several times instead of Adrain Winters, even where he must simply be called Adrain. I also noticed some other mistakes that you should correct.
Note Ptaah from 24.2. Tori, due to the fact that the contact reports were corrected and revised together with Ptaah since the first contact of 28 January 1975, the errors in the corresponding reports were continuously corrected, which will continue to be the case for all following contact reports.
I will, of course, but we should discuss these issues later, because I have something else. Since you just spoke about Michael Heseman, I wanted to tell you that he was here last Saturday, the 21st of February, with Jaime Maussan from Mexican television. And of course there was also a cameraman and a sound engineer, because we did a long interview from Mexico, which only ended at 03:30 HRs. Of course, Michael Heseman also filmed it and wants to make something separate out of it. Furthermore, in his magazine 2000, the entire fraud and deception of Adrain alias Archon, who is actually called Manny Escandon, was uncovered in the magazine 2000 issue No. 11 of November 1970. For this uncovering of the fraud and deception, Michael Heseman is now attacked with letters to the editor, namely by Adrain Archon Manny Escandon believers, as you can read here in the magazine issue No. 2 of February 1998.
It is extremely regrettable that the fraudulent and lying machinations and allegations of this Adrain Archon are met with such uncritical and unbelievingly irresponsible acceptance. Homage, approval, and recognition, thereby denying, falsifying, and suppressing the truth.
Here on earth it is said, the believers want to be deceived.
I know that. Nevertheless, it is very regrettable that gullible ones let themselves be misled by such fraudsters. Swindlers and liars enjoin such persons without hesitation, contradiction, or criticism, and defend them in such a kind and wise that they insult those who state the actual truth and even accuse them of lying. As is the case here in these incredibly stupid letters to the editor of Magazine 2000. It would be very appropriate that both these letter to the editor persons and all other Adrain Archon followers be brought a little closer to the real truth, and that it be explained that this alleged Pleiadian savior is nothing other than an infamous and profit-oriented deceiver and swindler, as well as a liar and charlatan, and moreover, since time immemorial is purely earthborn, who has nothing to do with our Pleiadian Pleiaran races or their spiritual levels. As we have explained several times before, you are also the only person on the earth who is in contact with us and with our spirit levels, which means that not only this Adrain Archon is lying and cheating about alleged contacts with us, but also all others who dare to claim to be in contact with us via channeling or telepathy or even physically. Apart from you, no other form of life on the earth has contact with us Pleiadians, Pleiaran, or with beings of our spiritual levels.
Apart from the fact that the Pleiades, which we see here from the earth, are not identical with your Pleiades, and on the other hand, the Pleiades known to us in our universe are only 62 million years old, and therefore still hellishly hot and too young to carry life, or even to have gathered planets around themselves, on which ultimately life would be possible.
This is a fact that is not taken into account by all alleged earthly contact persons because they do not know the relevant facts.
How do you imagine that in this matter we should do something again to draw the human being's attention to the real truth about the deceiver Adrain?
A clarification in a bulletin would certainly be appropriate.
Yes, we can do that. But now I have a question about the Dalai Lama. Yesterday evening we had a little discussion which led to the question if he belonged to our group, which I answered with a no, because Quetzal once gave me an answer of this form. But we did not talk about whether he, the Dalai Lama, belonged to the outer circle of those who were involved as voluntary advisors and helpers at the decisive early time. Do you know anything about it?
His spiritual form and his total block of consciousness are indeed among those former personalities who were active as external, voluntary counselors and helpers. However, there is no relationship with today's core group, for in his form he works freely, although the circumstances do not correspond exactly to the provisions he was supposed to fulfill. In principle, he should have been a free teacher of the teaching of the Spirit, without being bound to any religion.
This raises a new question. Why did the Dalai Lama come to Buddhism when he should have been a free teacher? I was asked this question, which I then answered as follows. And I hope that I was right. The Buddhist monks, as is generally known, seek their leader with the help of meditation and with visions, etc., when such a monk has to take on his new task again. The responsible Buddhist monks now consciously believe themselves to be so far and highly developed that through meditation and vision, etc., they are able to take on their new task. They would receive information and hints where to look for the new leader. The child himself is still in childhood at that time and is brought by the monks to their center, where the child is then taught and trained for many years, so that when his time comes he can take over his office. And the child is allegedly found by the monks because he is to be equipped with extraordinarily high consciousness swinging waves, which are supposedly caught and elicited by the monks. From this, it should be evident that a child of this kind already carries out strong consciousness activities at an early age, and consequently also has a high development of consciousness, so that it is only a matter of time for the seeking monks until they come across these swinging waves and find the child, which then also recognizes objects, etc., through meditative influences, etc., which, for example, are supposed to have belonged to former leaders of Buddhist persuasion. Of course, this explanation is very simplified.
An explanation that can be left at that, because it is true, even if it is very simple, as you say. But now, dear friend Edward, we should slowly come to an end with our conversation, because the time has come for me to leave. Therefore, I would like to conclude by mentioning something that concerns me. You told me about last Saturday's interview, but I already knew about it because Florina was watching. It was not really an intention, but a coincidence that just happened. As Florina told me, not everything went as it should have done with regard to the interviewing of various group members for such work, which was supposed to be informative. As Florina noted, some members of the group were quite awkward in their narratives and explanations, which was not exactly helpful to the situation in terms of clarification. The members of the group as a whole should really try harder to become proficient in clear language and clear, comprehensible, and coherent interpretations. This has already been explained earlier, with the remark that the individual members of the group should endeavor to give lectures that are useful in terms of a clear, fluid, and coherent presentation of facts, which is also necessary in the visitor service, Sunday visiting hours at SSSC, where there are as many difficulties with the narratives and explanations as there were in the last Saturday interview. And it is precisely in such interviews that it is necessary to speak a clear, fluent, and understandable language and to mention coherent details of an important nature without speaking choppily or even stuttering. Also, important questions have to be answered, which may have to be presented to the interviewer persons for questioning, so that they really attach the corresponding questions, which then have to be answered by the group members. These are mainly basic questions, which are very important, and which each individual group member has to answer in writing first, in order to remember the answers for use. I imagine 7 questions that are important and that can be used for interviews. 1. What were your motivations to join Billy and the mission? 2. What was the most impressive thing you experienced at with or in the context? 3. What did you learn from Billy or about his character? 4. What benefits have you gained from the teaching of the Spirit so far? 5. What is the most impressive thing you have gained for yourself through Billy? Or what is the most impressive experience you have had about yourself? 6. What image and impression do you have of Billy? 7. The mission and its fulfillment. What does that mean for you? Of course, there are many more questions that can be consulted and answered that relate purely to the mission and teaching of the Spirit. But these questions should be worked out by the group members in their entirety or individually, and then answered by the individual members in writing on the one hand and in lecture form on the other. The questions I have created and their answers, which are to be given by the individual group members and recorded in written form, I find absolutely important, because they lay down clear facts which prove that the mission on the one hand cannot be compared with any sectarian machinations, and that you, Billy, on the other hand, are not a guru and therefore not a sect preacher or the like. Further, I have here 7 more questions, which are also of importance and about which the individual group members should think about and define these in writing. 1. What insights have the teaching of the Spirit as well as the explanations brought you so far? 2. What is the sum of your previous learning and what benefits do you see in it? 3. What do life, dying, death, and reincarnation mean to you? 4. What do you see as the task of your life? 5. What does the truth of creational order mean to you? 6. What do you understand by equal rights of man and woman? 7. What do you think about true love and love for the one next to you, neighbor?
Useful questions, I find.
That is why I have mentioned them. But now, my friend, I must go my ways. If you need my presence, I have to tell you that I am indispensable for the next 17 days. However, if you have any urgent questions, you can contact Florina, who is always available for information. If you have any questions that only I can answer, she will be happy to forward them to me and then bring or send you the relevant answer. Goodbye, my friend.
Goodbye, Salome.
Salome.